Fall is in the air. It's so exciting. One of my favorite times of the year. I've come up with this really great fall project. It features a crow and some beautiful fall leaves. We will be doing some raw edge applique and some thread sketching over the top of it. I have this really great technique for you. And we're going to embellish this crow in such a way as it will give it some added dimension. So stick around. I'll be showing you exactly what you'll need to complete this project. For this fall project, you're going to want to start with a foundation of off-white fabric. I have this batik here that has some different shades in it that I really liked. You can choose something that you have in your stash. Of the off-white fabrics, you're going to need about 5/8 of yard, maybe a little bit more. This piece here is 14 by 14, and I've also cut out a piece of batting for the backing of this centerpiece. I want it to set up in the final quilt that we're making, so I have added a piece of batting for that. For our crow, we'll need a piece of black mottled fabric. You can use solid black if you want, but I think you get more dimension from the crow if you use something that has some varying colors in it. This piece measures 9 by 7. And then some wash away water soluble stabilizer. We're going to be tracing on the design lines for the crow onto this. So this is an important piece to have. You could also use some tracing paper, but you will have to pick out the little bits of paper that might get caught in your thread sketching when you do that. For added dimension for your crow, I like to use some tulle or netting. I particularly like this one because it has a little bit of shimmer in it. This piece measures 7 by 12. And here is our crow. So this is going to be what we use to trace our crow out with. We will trace it out on the water-soluble stabilizer as well as some fusible web. We'll want to trace it onto the paper side with our pencil. I like to use a mechanical pencil. So that's important to have. And the graphics that I used in this design will be linked in the caption below, so you can get those design files. We're also going to be doing a bunch of leaves, and I have 5 different fabrics here that are very fall-like. Each one of these measures 5 by 7, so you'll need 5 different shades cut 5 by 7. And the dark brown will be for our branches. These are our branches here. And this needed to be a little bit bigger, so it's 5 by 8. You have these templates here that you can use with your fusible web, and you're going to trace onto the paper side of the fusible web. And once you trace each section out, then you're going to fuse it to your fabric before you cut it out. This is really important because it just makes it way easier. And I have included 5 different sheets, but you could technically just use one if you wanted. So there's that. I have, again, some strips of the off-white and the mottled black, and this will be for the borders. This orange here that complements both the leaves and some star blocks that we're going to do are for the inside borders of our feature block with a crow. And these fabrics here will be for 2 stars that you're going to do, which I thought really lend itself to this fall-themed quilt. In addition to this, you'll need a backing fabric, probably black, or you could use off-white. I would recommend about 1 yard. You'll be cutting that down to a 27 by 36 inch piece of fabrics for your final quilting. Binding, you'll need about 1/3 of a yard. This is how the fusible or the water-soluble wash-away stabilizer comes. And there are lots of different products out there that you can get. It generally comes on a roll. For tracing on the water-soluble stabilizer, I recommend that you use a pen. The pen is going to just wash away when you submerge your quilt to remove it in warm water, so don't be alarmed by that. For cutting out your leaves, you're going to want to use some really sharp scissors. These are really sharp, and I can get in and do all the detail cutting that I need to do on these leaves. You'll also need some decorative threads. These are hand-dyed threads from Valdani, and they just have a beautiful array of fall colors. So the black we'll be using for the crow. These autumn colors we'll be using for the leaves and the branches. For your thread sketching, depending on what kind of machine you have, I sew on a Bernina. You could use a free motion foot. This is foot number 72. And if you're fortunate enough to have a BSR foot with a stitch regulator, these work really great for keeping your stitches nice and even as well. And for quilting, once you have everything done, I like to use a walking foot. I use this foot all the time. If you don't have one, I recommend investing in one. You won't be sad that you did. Use it all the time. So let's get started cutting out our leaves and our crow, and I'll show you how to do that. So let's trace out our crow. I have the paper side up, and you want to use your pencil for this. And you're just going to go out along the outline of your crow. These mechanical pencils, I like them because they don't get dull and they keep the line really exact. And we'll trace out all the way around. And you don't want to cut out the fusible web first. You want to trace, and then we're going to fuse it to the back of our fabric, our black fabric, and then cut it out. And it'll be, if you have really sharp scissors, it will give you some really nice clean lines. I'm going to add these feet in here because his feet are going to get covered up with leaves. So there's no point in adding those in. And this just traces out really quickly. I thought the crown was a really nice touch. They're so majestic when you see them out and about, and they serve such a valuable part of our ecosystem. I've never become friends with one, but I know some people have created relationships with the crows in their neighborhoods, or at least that's what I've read. You can see this just traces out really quickly. So there you have it. That's all we need for our crow. Now we'll fuse it to the back side of our fabric. That's really important that you put it on the back side because I have done it wrong. So don't do like I do and do it wrong. Fuse it on the back side of your fabric, and then we'll cut it out. I'm going to do all the fusing at one time. So let's move on to tracing out some leaves and our branches. This piece of fusible web measures 18 by 17 and a half. So you should be able to get all that you need out of it. I measured it out to make sure that you would be able to get, but let's make sure that I did it right. And if you want to hold that down in place, you can use a little bit of painter's tape so that it's not shifting around on you. And you don't need to add the stems or any of these inner lines. We just want the outline of the leaves. Once you get going on this, it may seem tedious right now, but it actually goes really quickly. I'm going to pause the video now and trace these all out and come back when I have them all traced out. So I don't think that you really want to sit here and watch me do all of this. Now we have all of our tracings onto the back or the paper side of our fusible web. We can cut these apart now. Just use some utility scissors. Don't use your good scissors, you know, that saying for quilters. So there's our crow. So there's all of our tracings. We don't need these anymore for right now. And now I'm going to get set up to do some ironing. Let's start with our leaves and our branches. So identify what you want to be the front or the back, especially on batiks. You'll notice that sometimes they're a little blurred on one side so that we don't get fusible web onto our ironing surface. You want to make sure that it doesn't extend past your fabric. And leave the paper intact. This is the back side, so really important. I personally have fused to the wrong side, so don't make my mistake. Let's trim this down. There we go, that's perfect. Let's see. I think this side is better. Yeah. So the leaves are all done. Now the branches. Let's see, is this, need to trim off a little bit more. I always like to leave a little bit of extra room when I'm doing the trim for when I'm trimming so that we get nice crisp edges. So those are all done. Now we can do our crow. Again, we're on the back side of our fabric. Oops. We'll let that crow cool. Move this out of the way. And using our sharp scissors, we will just start cutting around along that line. And it goes by pretty quickly. This is a great time to be listening to a book or watching a show on Netflix. I'm a little out of touch with Netflix these days. I haven't really been watching much of a streaming TV. You can see how crisp our lines are. And set that off to the side. And I'll cut the rest of that out. So we've got our branches cut out. Now let's do our crow. If you keep your scissors stationary and move the fabric, that is a really great strategy. And you can see I could get that little piece out really easily. Same way with this one, because I'm wanting to keep that kind of feathered look. So to keep that point crisp, I cut all the way up in there, and now I'm coming back and catching that outside line and then clipping that away. And you can see that it keeps that intact. I hope that will help you. And these scissors are nice because they have some nice points on them. And remember, keep your scissors stationary and then turn your fabric piece, and it'll create a nice crisp line for your fabric. And here we'll do these little balls at the top of the crown. You want to try not to cut through where the ball is. Don't get too in the weeds with this. We'll come back and do those detailed cuts after we get the majority of this off. And there our crow is all up. A couple little details right here we could cut out. Okay, so there's the crow. He's got a bit of a clubbed foot there. We'll move that stuff out of the way. Now we can start on the leaves. Now, you're probably asking yourself, gosh, TJ, that's a lot of leaves. Really? Are we going to use all those leaves? Well, we may, but we may not. I have some ideas of how we could use some of the leftover leaves that I'm kind of excited to experiment with. So we'll see how it goes. But once you start cutting all this out, it goes pretty fast. You're like, yeah, but you say that all the time. Well, some parts of quilting just aren't that fast. I mean, we'll sit in peace for hours. But when you see how this is all laid out, you're going to be so excited. So there you go, a leaf. And so we will pile these all together with all their little brown friends, and we'll do it for the rest of these. Maybe we should watch some TV or watch a YouTube video. Now that we have all of our fused pieces cut out, and you can see that I have laid out the branches here, if you have some that are crossing over and you don't want to increase the bulk that you'll be stitching through, you can clip these off. We will be covering the branches up with some leaves. So trying to minimize some of the bulk is what I would recommend. I think this is a nice layout, how we have it here. We'll put some clusters of leaves around his legs so you won't see that he doesn't have any feet. And we can start to fuse our pieces to the background. Now, the finished measurement of this is going to be 12 and 5/8 by 13 and 5/8. So 12 on the height and 13 on the width. So you do want to measure to make sure that you have enough seam allowance on either side. And you can see that we have that here so that everything is lining up correctly. So be sure to check to make sure that you're in the working area, because we will be adding some borders. We'll trim the background piece down when we're done thread sketching it. So let's remove our paper backing. Sometimes it can be a little bit tricky. If you use your fingernail, it will release, depending on what brand you're using. I think he looks very nice right there. These smaller pieces can be tricky to get the paper. Oh, that one came off really easily. And if the branches aren't all connecting, remember we'll be adding some leaves so you won't see them. I'm going to do the branches before I put any of the leaves down, partly because I want to thread sketch the branches before the leaves go down. Tweezers are always nice to have. You can smooth them out, smooth the pieces out. So that went rather quickly. And now we'll fuse our pieces down. The fusible web I'm using is just Peplon by the yard. I'll buy it when it's on sale. So we'll let this cool a minute. Oop. Check to make sure that you have all of that it's all fused down good before you take it over to the sewing machine. So we're going to start by doing the thread sketching on the branches, and then we'll lay some leaves over the top of that. And I'm going to wait until the end to actually thread sketch the crow. I want him placed in it, even though we're not going to start with him right away, because of where the leaves are going to get placed on here. And it's fine to cover up some of him, but he is the star of the show. And so we don't want to cover him up completely. So we have the machine all threaded. I have my BSR. This is a stitch regulator for Bernina, which will help with keeping the stitches even. But before we do that, seeing how I've just threaded the machine, let's do a little test for tension. I always like to do this before I start working on my finished piece, just to see if the machine is threaded correctly and that we're not going to have any problems. Better to be safe than sorry. And that looks very nice. Nice balanced stitches. So let's start working on our feature block. So I do have some batting on the back of this. I've chosen not to put another piece of fabric behind there. I just didn't want to add to the bulk of it. The path that I'm going to take is I'm going to down here and go up, come back down, go up, come back down, come back down, go up and back down, and then we can come back and in there and do the same on the other side. I like to bring my threads to the front just so that I can keep track of them. I have black thread in my bobbin. I'll probably change it out when I go to do some of the leaves because the thread color is a little bit lighter. And we're not looking for perfection. We want it to have a painterly effect. And it help give the branches a little bit more texture. Some of this is going to be covered up. If you're not familiar with the stitch regulator, the needle goes at the speed that I'm moving the fabric. I am pushing down on a presser foot. Let's just add a little bit in here, just like a branch would be. I'm not so concerned about this area crossing over because I'm planning on putting leaves there. Mhm. So now we have our branches all stitched down. I'll thread these tails and move them to the back just to keep my work on the front tidy. And give a little knot. So we have it all stitched down, and now we'll add our leaves. Now we get to have fun with some of the leaves. I like to start with some of the bigger leaves first because we're going to be layering them. And we want to create something that's pleasing where we're using the different colors, adding the different colors in and the different sizes. And of course, I have my favorites. And we'll do this layering effect. I don't know that I want that dark one there though. Oh, let's put a shimmer. Oh, this is a shimmery one. Well, we'll just start with that one and then we'll put a shimmery one over the top of it and maybe a darker one. Because we want them to look as though that like they're out in nature, what the leaves would look like out in nature. So something along that line. So we don't want all of these ones that are going to be stacked on top quite yet, but at least we have a plan. Place some of these other ones. Maybe have a little bit of the branch poking out there. Because we're going to layer and continue to layer as we do this. I keep going for this, but we also want to keep the colors balanced too. So I think that looks nice for our first layering of leaves. So we'll take our paper backing off and place them down. You'll notice that I have them going different directions, changing the angle. Where are you going? Did he make popcorn? Bullet's trying to get out of his bed. When my husband makes popcorn, he wants to go downstairs so that he can have some popcorn because You don't get popcorn up here. Well, he does sometimes. I think we should put one here. So I think that looks nice. So let's fuse these down. And let's get some of our other threads. So I have this really pretty orange and this gold that I really like. But we have the brown in the machine, so we can start with the brown and then we'll switch out to this autumny orange, which is just gorgeous, in the gold. With our threads to the top and our needle in the down position, we'll start doing the outline of our brown leaves, and then we'll go in and do the veins. I didn't trace any of the veins on just because it's easy enough to do without it. But you can trace the veins on if that works best for you. So we'll continue in the same manner on all of the different colored leaves, and I'll be switching out the threads that I use, and then we'll fuse down another layer of leaves and we'll thread sketch those. I did change out my bobbin thread so that we didn't have any black dots showing through on the front with our thread sketching. Now we have added the second layer of leaves, and so they're falling over the top, and you can see why I wanted to thread sketch a layer before I added a second layer, and then we'll also be adding a third layer. So I have some falling ones up here at the top, and so now we'll just continue to thread sketch, and we'll add another layer once we're done. Now I have added layer 3 of the leaves, and we'll thread sketch those down. And I think I'm going to add some more down in through here to just close in this area here. So now we have all of our leaves done. Now we will prepare our water dissolvable stabilizer for thread sketching our crow. And if you position it corner to corner, you'll be able to get all of him on there. I like to use a ballpoint pen, but test your pen off to the side, and you're going to want to trace on your crow the design lines. Now you'll be able to see the outline, obviously, of the crow, but you want to trace the detailed lines that you will thread sketch onto your stabilizer. The wings, the beak, the eye. Be sure to keep it sketchy by adding texture. Lay the stabilizer on top of your fused crow to see how it is aligned. Before you pin the stabilizer, I am going to place some tools. Bunch it up and cut to create a frayed effect. The cut strips can then be laid on top of the crow to create feathered effect. Let the tool extend past the crow to create dimension. After we are done sketching, you can go back and trim the excess. Pin the stabilizer over the top of the tool. I've changed out my thread to this Valdani hand-dyed thread. This is a variegated black, blue, kind of tan, and it has the colors that you would see in a crow. So I was really excited that I had this in my thread storage. So we'll thread up our machine. So just using the black outline of what we've fused down, I'm going to go around the edges and then I'm going to do the interior. Remember to keep it nice and sketchy, and you can see how the crow is really starting to come to life now as we're adding these lines in. This stabilizer is a wash away stabilizer, so we will be using some warm water to get rid of this stabilizer, and you'll really see the texture come to life with this crow. Don't be afraid to add your own take on it. Make it your own. Now we'll cut away as much of the stabilizer as we can, trying not to cut the tool that's extending past our crow. You want to be aware of it for sure and leave as much as possible. By cutting it away, this is less that will have to dissolve in the warm water, so I highly recommend that you do this. It'll save time when it comes to dissolving the stabilizer. I have a bowl of warm water and we're just going to submerge it. I know it seems really scary, and do you really want to do this? But you do. And you'll be able to feel the stabilizer start to dissolve. It's somewhat like a gelatin type product, and you'll start to feel the texture of the crow come through as the stabilizer dissolves. Give it a gentle squeeze of the water to remove the excess, and then place on a towel. If you use this towel method, you'll be able to squeeze out most of the water and leave the piece relatively dry without distorting your crow. So roll up the towel with the piece inside of it and give it a gentle squeeze so that the towel's absorbing the moisture. You can see I'm rolling it here, and this works really well. Once you've done that, you can lay it to dry for a bit, and you could also even use a warm iron to press out more of the water. After it's dry, we can add some more tulle to it. So now that we have our crow, he's pretty much dry. There's a little bit of dampness here and there, but it's good enough for now. It's time to add another layer of this netting. And I have my pins here. And we just want to add a little bit of feathery dimension to him. And around his eye here, I want to add just a little clump. And you can kind of see that I have it pinched a bit. I trimmed some of it away. Don't want it to be quite that big. So we'll just put a pin right here to secure that. Piece. And then I want him to have the effect that there's some that it's a little bit feathery here as well. So I'm going to cut the shape kind of like a quarter circle. I'm going to fold down. Well, actually, we could fold it on top and it will create a more little short feathers. And we'll pin that in place. Don't worry about it too much if it's sticking up, because we're going to stitch those down. And you can see that if we stitch it down, that it's going to give it a little bit more dimension. And you can add as much as you want or as little as you want. So we'll put this one underneath that other one. Maybe we'll add a pin there. And then let's add some to his tail feathers. We could even take off those corners. Just like that. I just love this technique because it gives you a lot of bang for your buck. You get really great effect. And so then after we get the stitch down, then we can go in and clip some of it and change it up a little bit, minimize it, make it a little bit more ruffly where we want it more ruffly. So let's go over to the sewing machine and we'll stitch those down. Now you can see this all really up close. And we don't need a lot of stitches. Let's see, where is his eye? So I'm just going to do a series of zigzags here. And so then when we go to accent his eye, we'll put his little bead right there for his eye. And it'll give us some texture. I'm going to start here underneath. And go down a couple of times, not a lot. We don't want to stitch it down completely. We want it to look feathered. I sure have a problem with that, seeing feathery. So our intention is not for this to be all stitched down. We want it to kind of be frayed looking and to look like feathers. So like right here, we have a nice fold. We can release that. You can trim some of this away. Just like so. The same in here. Cut some of it away. This seems a little excessive, so we'll take some of this off. Some of you are probably like, TJ, don't get too carried away. We liked it. Okay, so now it's time to move on to some of the other components. We'll set this aside for now, and we'll move on to creating our borders. To construct our borders, we have 4 strips that are cut 2 inches wide with the fabric, and we're going to sew these together 1/4 of an inch seam allowance with the fabric. And we're going to do some strip piecing with this. I have a tutorial that I'll link that you can go and watch if you haven't seen it already. And it gives you some really great tips on how to do strip piecing when you're doing with the fabric. And it has a lot to do with the pressing technique. And if you invest in a metal ruler from the hardware store, it's basically a metal yardstick. Comes in super handy. You want it to be metal because we're going to use it to press these seams open, and it helps keep the seams straight. I don't know about you, but I personally have struggled sometimes doing long seams pressed where they're not wavy. And if you use that metal ruler, it really helps keep them straight. So that when you subcut these strips, they're consistent because the seam has been pressed correctly. I also recommend that you shorten your stitch length to a 2.0, and that will help prevent the seams from fraying open as you work with them. So that is one pro tip that I think is really important. Now I'm going to go press this, and then we'll subcut and create our 4 patches for the border. So we have our strips all sewn together. There are 4 strips total, and we're going to need 72 2-inch pieces from these strips. So our finished measurement on the strips is 3.5 inches. And we're going to cut each one of these at 2 inches wide. So lining up our stitch line there, our seam. And we're going to cut 72. And we will create a 4 patch. Just like so, like that. I have all of my subcuts done on the strips that we sewed together, and you want to nest your seams together, and you'll get really nice crisp points on those blocks. So we're going to do them in units, and we need to do 7. We need to do 3 sets of 7. So let's separate them out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If we do it ahead of time, it just helps keep us organized. There's 3. And if you separate them out, it just makes it that much easier and you stay more organized. You want to stay tuned to see how these checkerboard border goes together on our crow, and it just creates such a dynamic piece. And I will also be showing how I put together a couple of star blocks that we're going to add to this piece as well. Have you ever seen one of these? Kind of handy. It's so bright, I can't lose it in my studio. Great thing to have when you're doing strip piecing. So we'll maybe get these blocks open, and you can see how nice that comes together. And now you'll sew your 4 patches together. And I pressed my seams to the dark side. So now we have an 8x2. We'll sew these together. And add our last 4 patch. I like the complicated things, but I have to tell you, it's kind of nice sometimes to not have to think about what you're doing. And if you have it all laid out for you, then you can go way faster. So there you have it. This is one of the segments that we'll need for our border. We'll just clip off some of these threads so we don't have to deal with them later on. And repeat, rinse and repeat. Now we have all of our checkerboard border strips done. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to create the star blocks and how the whole quilt comes together and all the finishing details. So if you haven't yet liked, subscribed, and hit the notification, it would be a good idea to do that so that you can see how this fall project all comes together. Until we see each other again, happy stitching.